I don't know when it started, this slow slide into nothing. At first, I told myself it was just a phase. You know how it is. Life gets busy, kids grow up, people change. But the truth? The truth is that Clara's affair with Jason wasn't something that just happened. It's been happening for years, maybe longer than I even realized. It's the kind of thing you can see if you stop pretending everything is okay. And I had stopped seeing it. I had stopped feeling it. Clara and I, well, we've been married for 19 years. 19 years of building a life, raising 3 kids. Lucas is 18 now, Maya's 16, and Olivia is 14. When I think back on it, we had a good start. We were the kind of couple that everyone admired. We were those perfect parents, everyone else's idea of a solid family. I always told myself we were fine, even when things started shifting, even when Clara started changing. It wasn't sudden. It never is, right? It was more like a slow, creeping thing. First, it was the little stuff. The way Clara started staying late at work, or how she'd casually mention meeting with Jason for late-night brainstorming sessions about the new project at her office. And then, the wardrobe changes. She started dressing differently, buying new clothes, wearing perfume that didn't quite smell like her old scent. I kept telling myself it was just her wanting to feel good again, you know? After 19 years of marriage, maybe she was just trying to find herself. She's always had a little vanity, but I never thought it would lead to this. But it wasn't just the clothes or the hours at work. It was the silence at home. Clara was home less and less. She'd spend entire nights away, and when she did come back, she seemed distant, not in a way that felt right. Like she was physically there, but emotionally somewhere else. And I felt it. I felt it in the small ways. Her avoiding eye contact when I tried to talk about anything important, her excuses about why she couldn't be bothered to sit down for dinner with the family. I wasn't an idiot. I knew something was off. But still, I did nothing. I let her slip further and further away. And then there were the motels. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. There was something in the back of my mind whispering the truth every time Clara would leave. I didn't want to face it, but I started following her. Just once at first, then more. I hated myself for doing it, but I had to know. I had to see her with him, Jason. I needed to confirm the nagging suspicion that had been eating at me for months. And I did. I followed her one evening, watched as she pulled into one of those run-down motels by the highway, and saw Jason get out of his car to meet her in the parking lot. They didn't even try to hide it. I watched them walk in together, hand in hand, laughing like they hadn't a care in the world. I don't even know why I stayed. I could have driven away then, confronted her, or done something, but I didn't. I sat there in the car for what felt like hours, feeling my heart crumble into dust. I thought I'd throw up, but I didn't. I just went home like a coward. The worst part wasn't even that I knew. Everyone knew. Lucas started slamming doors when she come home late, throwing angry words that he never used to say. Maya gave Clara the cold shoulder, her eyes full of disgust. Olivia, quiet as ever, would spend the whole evening with her headphones on, pretending nothing was wrong. It wasn't just the affair that had poisoned our home. It was the fact that no one talked about it. No one said anything. We all just pretended. And I let it happen. I let this thing continue. And Clara? She never admitted anything. Not once. Not even when I confronted her with everything. I don't even know why I bothered. She just brushed it off like I was imagining things. "You've got a wild imagination, David," she'd say with a laugh. Almost like she was mocking me for caring. It hurt, but I didn't fight back. I just told myself it would get better. That if I gave her space, things would change. That maybe it was a phase for her too. Maybe we could get back to where we were. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't something that was going to pass. It was a slow death, and we were all suffocating under it. The problem wasn't just Clara anymore. It was me. I had allowed this. I had stayed silent for too long, hoping she'd change, hoping things would get better. But it had gone too far. My kids were falling apart, my marriage was dying, and I was the one standing by, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. The truth hit me hard one night, sitting in the silence of our home. I realized something. This wasn't my family anymore. This wasn't the life I had built. And maybe, just maybe, I was the last one to see it. I wasn't ready to leave yet. I wasn't ready to face the fallout of what I knew would happen. But I could feel the end coming, like the quiet before a storm. The question was, how long could I stay in the eye of this hurricane before I finally made a choice? I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stand the tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud that was about to burst. For months, maybe longer, I had been suffocating. Every time I looked at Clara, every time I watched her walk in late from one of her meetings, I felt this rage building up inside me. Not just anger, disgust, disappointment. She was destroying everything we had, and I had just let it happen. Not once had I confronted her. Not once had I asked her the one question that had been haunting me. What the hell is going on, Clara? But that night, everything changed. I don't know what pushed me over the edge. Maybe it was the way she came home after a late-night dinner with Jason, laughing like nothing had happened. Maybe it was how she barely looked at me, but instead, focused on her phone as if I didn't even exist. The kids were in bed, and I was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, pretending I wasn't broken, pretending I wasn't dying inside. But I was. And that's when it hit me. I was done. I wasn't going to be the man who watched everything fall apart and did nothing. I wasn't going to be the guy who stayed in this miserable marriage because I was too scared to face the truth. So, I did it. I told her, Clara, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but my insides trembling. She looked at me, slightly confused, then shrugged and sat down on the other end of the couch. I could see it in her eyes, the same thing I had been seeing for months now, detachment. It was like we were strangers in the same house. What about? She asked, almost too casually. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like everything just exploded inside me. All that rage, that pain, that feeling of betrayal that had been eating away at me for so long. It all came out in one breath. I'm leaving, Clara. I'm taking the kids and we're leaving. She froze. Her eyes went wide, but for a moment, she didn't say anything. It was like she couldn't even process what I was saying. What do you mean, you're leaving? She asked slowly, as if testing the words. I mean, I'm done, I replied, my voice harder now. The kids can't take this anymore. You've ruined everything, and I can't keep pretending that I don't see it. I can't keep pretending that this family is okay when it's falling apart right in front of me. You've been having an affair with Jason for who knows how long, and you've lied to my face about it. I've seen it. I know what's been going on, and I'm done. The silence between us was suffocating. She didn't look shocked, though. In fact, she seemed almost relieved. I don't know. It was hard to read her expression. Maybe she had been expecting this moment to come for a long time. I didn't care. You can't just leave, she said, shaking her head. You're overreacting, David. You've been distant too, haven't you? Maybe this is your fault too. I laughed, bitter and empty. My fault? Really, Clara? How is this my fault? I stayed. I tried. I didn't leave when you started changing. I didn't leave when you were out all night with him, acting like everything was fine. I didn't leave when you came home smelling like him, when you started buying new clothes and working out at the gym like you were prepping for some damn date with him. Her face tightened. You're being unfair. No, I snapped, standing up. I'm being honest. And I'm tired of pretending this isn't happening. You're not the woman I married anymore, Clara. You're not the mother of my children anymore. And I'm not going to sit here and watch you tear us apart any longer. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing in something like anger, but there was something else in there too. Fear. She didn't want to admit it, but I could see it. The moment the reality set in for her. The fact that I was serious. I'm leaving, Clara. I'm taking the kids. We're moving out. And I'm not paying for this house anymore. I'm done financially supporting this mess. David, you can't do that. You can't just leave. She was scrambling now, grasping at whatever she could hold on to. I already have. I walked out of the room without waiting for her to respond. It felt final. I didn't need her to say anything else. There was nothing left to say. When I told the kids, I could see the relief in their faces. They knew. They'd been living with this silent tension for so long. Lucas barely even reacted. He's 18, and he's had his own issues to deal with. More withdrawn than he used to be, barely speaking to Clara anymore. Maya, she looked angry, like she'd been waiting for this moment to come, But at least she wasn't sad. Olivia just stared at me. I don't know what she was feeling, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't expect Clara to beg me to stay. She didn't. She didn't even apologize. She didn't seem to understand that this was the end. To her, I think this was just some phase I was going through, a tantrum that would blow over. But I wasn't going to change my mind this time. I was done with the lies. I was done with being the fool. We left that night. I packed up the kids, grabbed what we needed, and drove to my parents' house. It wasn't easy, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't stay in that house any longer, surrounded by all the ghosts of what was lost. When I walked out the door, I knew it was over. I wasn't going back. Not this time. I thought leaving would feel like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I'd finally done it. I'd finally taken control of my life, my family's life. The months of pretending, the nights of silence, of watching Clara destroy everything we had, they were all behind me now. But when we left, I realized something. Leaving wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. We stayed at my parents' house for a few days after the move. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best I could do. The kids were still in shock. I could see it in their eyes every time they looked at me like I was the one who destroyed the family. I didn't blame them. They were angry, and they had every right to be. I had failed them too, by staying so long. But I couldn't focus on that right now. I had to get them out of that toxic environment. We were all in survival mode, just trying to get through each day. It felt strange to be back under my parents' roof after all these years. My mom was kind, offering me the comfort I didn't know I needed. My dad, though, didn't say much. He was always the quiet type, and I could tell he was disappointed. Not in me. He was disappointed in the situation. That's the way he was. The family always tried to hold it together, no matter what. But I could see it in his face. He was just waiting for me to hit rock bottom, so he could help me rebuild. That's what parents do, right? In the days that followed, I kept thinking about Clara. I didn't want to think about her, but it was impossible not to. She was still back in that house, probably with Jason, probably carrying on like everything was normal. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was unaffected by what had happened. I had left, but she hadn't changed. The truth was, she'd been checked out for so long, emotionally. The affair hadn't just broken our marriage. It had broken her, too. She was too far gone, and no amount of me staying or fighting for us would have ever brought her back. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. It was about the kids. They were the ones who had to live with this for the rest of their lives. They were the ones whose world had been shattered. Lucas, Maya, and Olivia. They had been living with this tension, this coldness, long before I finally woke up. They were the collateral damage of Clara's choices and mine, too. I'd been so passive, so desperate for things to go back to normal, that I had failed them in the worst way possible. The first few days, the kids barely said anything. Lucas kept to himself, Maya retreated to her room, and Olivia just stared at the wall. I knew they weren't okay, but what could I do? I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't even sure I knew how to help them. What I did know was that this was just the start. The real work would come in the months ahead. But for now, we just needed to breathe. Just get through the day without breaking down completely. Then, one afternoon, I got the call. It was Clara. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I left. I didn't want to, but she called anyway. David, she said, her voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Frustration? Or just anger? I don't know what you want from me, but you can't just leave like this. We need to talk about the house, the bills, the kids. I felt a surge of rage. She couldn't be serious. After everything, after the lies, the affair, the betrayal, she was worried about the house? About the money? I'm done supporting you, Clara, I snapped. I'm done paying for this. You're not getting a cent from me anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her trying to compose herself, trying to hide whatever she was feeling. But I didn't care anymore. She had taken everything from me. From us. You're not just going to leave us hanging, David. The kids are fine. I cut her off, my voice shaking with the anger I could no longer hide. You're the one who isn't seeing it. This is about them. They're the ones who've had to watch you tear this family apart. They're the ones who've lived in this toxic mess. I'm protecting them, Clara. That's the only thing that matters now. I could hear her breathing on the other end, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. She didn't know what to say, but she didn't fight me. Not this time. Instead, she finally said, "I'll file for divorce." I wasn't surprised. The words felt empty coming from her, but I also knew it was the inevitable next step. We'd been drifting for too long. The divorce papers were just a formality at this point. But even as I prepared myself for it, I felt something cold wash over me. Something numb. "I'll sign the papers," I said quietly, "but I'm not fighting you for anything. No house, no car, nothing. Just sign the damn papers and let's get it over with." There was no response. I don't think there ever would have been. It was over. She had her affair. She had her lover. And now, she was going to have to deal with the consequences. When I hung up the phone, I felt like I had taken the first step toward closing the door on a chapter of my life I'd been too afraid to finish. The next few months would be brutal. The divorce would be messy, no doubt. But I was done. Clara had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I looked at my kids. They were staring at me, waiting for me to lead them out of the storm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I knew exactly what I had to do. It's been a few weeks since I signed the divorce papers. It still feels like I'm living in a dream. Like any moment, I'm going to wake up and this will all be over. But it's not. It's real. My life has been shredded, and every day feels like I'm walking through a fog, just trying to keep my kids safe while piecing together what's left of myself. I'm working odd jobs now, just enough to keep the lights on. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm grateful for that. My parents have been great, letting us crash here as we figure things out. I know I need to get us a place of our own soon. For now, though, I'm just trying to hold things together. The kids are starting to come around. Lucas talks to me more, though he still looks at me with this mixture of anger and confusion that I don't know how to fix. Maya has been more open, but she's distant, like she's waiting for something to change. Olivia, well, she's the quiet one. She's been the hardest to reach. She just curls up with her books and keeps to herself, but I can tell she's hurting. I haven't heard from Clara much since I left. Maybe once or twice. She still tries to call about the house, but I'm done. I'm done with her. The more I think about it, the more I realize I was never really mad at her. I mean, I was angry, furious, actually, but the deeper wound, the one I haven't been able to shake, is the lie. The fact that we lived in this house, in this family, pretending things were fine while she had Jason on the side, and I was too passive to do anything about it. That's the betrayal I can't get over, and I know I never will. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about the kids. They need me to be strong for them. I can't crumble. Not now. Then, one evening, Lucas walks into the living room with this look on his face. He's holding his phone, and for a second, he just stands there, staring at me. I can see something's weighing on him, something heavy. "Dad, can you come with me for a second?" he asks, his voice a little too calm. I can tell something's wrong, but I don't press him. We step outside, and he hands me his phone. On the screen is a picture of a girl I've never seen before. She's standing outside a house, smiling at the camera, and I can tell she's about Lucas's age. Pretty girl. Nice smile. "Who is this?" I ask, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "This is Sophia," he says quietly. "I've been seeing her for a couple of weeks now, but there's something you need to know." My heart skips a beat. "What do you mean? What's going on, Lucas?" His eyes flicker, and for the first time, I see the weight of what he's carrying. "Dad, I didn't want to tell you this, but I think you need to know. Her mom, her name is Emily. She's someone you used to know. A long time ago. From high school." A sick feeling twists in my stomach. "Emily?" I say slowly, trying to place the name, but it's like my brain isn't working fast enough. I feel the room tilt. "How do you know her, Mom?" "Because she's the one you used to date. Back before you met Mom." It's like the floor falls out from under me. For a moment, I can't speak. All I can hear is the sound of my own breath, loud and shaky. Lucas stands there, watching me carefully. He must see the shock in my face because he steps forward, his hand reaching for mine. "Dad, listen, I didn't know how to tell you. I wasn't sure if you knew her back then. but I've been spending time with Sophia, and there's something you should know. She's your daughter, Dad. I swear. The world goes completely still. My pulse roars in my ears. I blink, not sure if I've heard him right. What did you say? I whisper, my voice barely coming out. Dad, Sophia's your daughter. Emily, she kept it from you. All these years, she kept it a secret. I didn't know. But now that I'm with Sophia, my chest feels like it's about to collapse. I don't know whether to sit down, scream, or just walk away. I don't even know how to process what he just told me. Why are you telling me this now? I managed to ask, trying to steady myself. Why didn't you? I didn't know until recently, Lucas says, his voice low and full of regret. I was meeting Sophia's mom, Emily, and she told me. She said you never knew. She said you didn't even know about Sophia, that she was yours. A cold sweat breaks out across my forehead. This is unreal. It's too much. My mind races. How? How could Emily keep something like this from me? How could she have let me raise Lucas, believing he was the only one? And now, Sophia, my daughter, has been right under my nose this whole time, and I never knew. I feel like the ground is shifting beneath me, and I'm falling. Lucas looks at me, waiting for me to say something. But what do I say? What do I do? This changes everything. I take a deep breath, trying to ground myself. The thing is, I don't know what to do next. I've spent years raising my son, thinking I had all the answers, thinking I was the father I needed to be. But now, the truth has slapped me in the face. I don't know how to deal with the fact that I have a daughter out there, someone I never even knew existed. And I can't help but feel like I've been living in someone else's story all along. I barely slept that night. My mind was racing, the shock of what Lucas told me still gripping my chest like a vice. Sophia, my daughter. How? How could Emily have kept this secret from me all these years? How could I have raised Lucas, my son, and never known I had another child out there? Someone I could have been there for. Someone I could have loved, raised, been a father to. The next morning, I barely said a word. The kids knew something was off. They could always tell when I was lost in my own head. I didn't want to talk about it. I couldn't talk about it. How could I? Lucas had dropped a bombshell on me, and I didn't know how to even begin processing it. I kept thinking about Emily, how long she must have kept this from me. And why? Why tell me now, after all this time? After breakfast, I told Lucas we needed to go meet Sophia and her mom, Emily. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew I couldn't ignore this. I had to know the truth. I had to see her, meet her, find out if what Lucas said was really real. The drive to Emily's place was agonizing. Every mile felt like 1,000, the silence between Lucas and me like a heavy blanket. He kept glancing at me, but he didn't say anything. He didn't know how to say anything. Neither did I. When we arrived, I almost didn't want to get out of the car. I sat there, staring at the front door of the modest house, thinking about how everything I knew had just shattered. I had a daughter I didn't know about, and I had to face her. Face Emily. Face the past I had buried so long ago. Lucas was already out of the car, his phone in his hand, texting Sophia. He was eager, his feet moving fast, but I was frozen. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but nothing worked. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. Dad, Lucas called from the porch, looking back at me. You coming? I forced myself to stand and walk toward him, though my legs felt like lead. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, the doors swung open, and there she was, Emily. God, she looked the same. The years hadn't changed her much. Her blonde hair was shorter, but her eyes, the same eyes that I once looked into with love, with hope, stared back at me with something colder now. And then there was the small figure standing beside her. Sophia. The moment my eyes landed on her, I knew. There was no mistaking it. She had my eyes, my jawline, even the way she stood, awkwardly, trying to hide behind her mom like she was afraid of me. My daughter. I had a daughter, and I didn't even know it. Emily looked at me for a moment, then stepped aside to let us in. You must be David, she said, her voice low. It's good to see you. I didn't respond right away. What was there to say? I wasn't angry, at least not at her, not in the way I thought I might be. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Shock, disbelief, confusion, guilt. So much guilt. Hi, I finally muttered, looking down at Sophia. She was still standing by her mom, her eyes on the floor. You must be Sophia. Her gaze met mine briefly, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The same uncertainty I felt, too. We were strangers. Strangers who shared a bond one hadn't even known existed. I didn't know, I said, my voice cracking a little. I didn't know about you. I didn't know I was your father. Sophia nodded, her lip trembling. She didn't say anything, but I could see the pain in her eyes. She'd spent 18 years of her life without a father, and now here I was, a stranger to her, stumbling over words that didn't even feel real. I didn't want to tell you. Emily spoke up, her voice quieter now. I never meant for this to happen, but I couldn't keep it from you anymore. I should have told you back then, but I was scared. I didn't know how you would react. And then I kept putting it off. Why now? I asked, my voice sharp. Why didn't you tell me when I could have been a part of her life? Why now? Emily looked down, guilt flooding her face. I didn't think you'd want to be involved. And then life just went on. We both moved on. I got married, and Sophia grew up, and we just kept going. I thought it was better for everyone. But Lucas, when he met Sophia, and he told me who she was to you, I knew I couldn't keep lying anymore. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. I should have been there for her. For you. I should have been there all along. Sophia looked up at me, her eyes wide and filled with emotion. It's not your fault, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't even know about you until recently either. I didn't want you to feel like you had to. She stopped herself, clearly struggling to find the right words. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what to say, what to do. Everything felt wrong. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to run away from this. I had to be there for her now, even if I couldn't undo the past. I looked down at Sophia, my daughter, and said softly, I'm here now. I don't know what this all means, but I'm not going anywhere. Sophia nodded, and for the first time, she took a step toward me. It wasn't much, a small step, hesitant and unsure, but it was enough to tell me we had a chance. The past couldn't be erased. I couldn't go back and make things right, but maybe, just maybe, I could start trying now. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, they did. I didn't even know how to process the bombshell that Lucas dropped on me. Sophia was my daughter, my flesh and blood. For 18 years, I'd lived my life thinking I knew who I was, who I'd raised. But now everything felt uncertain. I had to figure out how to be a father to someone I didn't know, someone who had been living in the same town, the same city, and I'd never even known she existed. Sophia had been quiet after our first meeting, and I could see the unease in her eyes. She didn't know what to expect from me. Hell, I didn't know what to expect from myself. The pain of missing so much of her life was heavy, suffocating. I kept thinking of the moments, the years, when she could have been mine. I could have been there for her. But it was too late for that now. All I could do was try to make up for lost time. But how? The next few days were a blur of phone calls, texts, and awkward meetings. Sophia came over to my parents' house a couple of times, mostly to see Lucas, but there were moments when she'd linger, as if waiting for me to say something. Do something. But what could I say? What could I do to fill the void that had been there all these years? Emily was still in the picture, of course. I had to confront her, too. She'd kept this secret for so long, for reasons I could only guess at. And now she was sitting in front of me, explaining herself like I was supposed to understand. I didn't want to hurt you, Emily said, her eyes wide, full of the same guilt that had been there when she first told me. I didn't think you'd want to be involved. I didn't think it was fair to drag you into it. Fair? I barked, cutting her off. Fair to who? To Sophia? To me? You kept my daughter from me. You kept her from knowing me. How is that fair? She flinched, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of my words hit her all at once. David, you don't understand. I thought you had moved on. You had Clara. You were building a family. I didn't want to ruin that, but I could hardly hear her. I couldn't get the image of Sophia out of my mind. The girl who'd been living just down the street, probably wondering where her father was, wondering why I'd never been there for her. And then the worst part, Lucas, my own son. He had been dating his half-sister. He had no idea either. He had no clue about the tangled mess that was my past, my choices. You didn't think I'd want to know? Or you just didn't care? I said, my voice shaking with anger I didn't even know I still had. You lied to me, Emily. You lied to both of us. I didn't ask for this, but here I am, trying to figure out how to be a father to a child I should have known, to a daughter I should have been there for. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry, David. I didn't know what else to do. I thought you would be angry. I thought it would break everything. Well, it already did, I said, stepping back. You've broken everything. The truth was, I didn't know who to be angry at anymore. Emily? Clara? Myself? All of us had contributed to this mess. The lies, the secrets, the silence. I had spent so many years not seeing what was right in front of me. Sophia, and now, I had to pick up the pieces of a broken family that had been fractured by years of silence and deceit. Later that night, as I sat in the quiet of my parents' house, my mind started to clear. I had to stop wallowing in regret. I had to stop thinking about what could have been, because that wouldn't help anyone. Not me, not Sophia, not Lucas. The truth was, I didn't know how to fix the past, but I couldn't keep running from it. I looked at Lucas that night, sitting in the living room with his head buried in his phone, texting Sophia, his half-sister, the one I hadn't even known existed until days ago. The weight of it hit me again. Not just the betrayal, but how far-reaching these secrets were. Lucas had been dating her, his sister, and he didn't even know. I had to talk to him. Lucas, I said, my voice shaky but firm. We need to talk. About Sophia. He looked up, his expression guarded. He probably knew what was coming, but he didn't flinch. He never did. What about her? I should have told you this earlier, I began, trying to keep my voice steady, but I didn't know how. Lucas, I've been lying to you, to all of us, for a long time. Sophia, she's my daughter. Your sister. The room went silent. For a moment, I thought he might not believe me. But then, his face twisted in confusion, his eyes searching mine as if trying to find some explanation that made sense of all this. But it wasn't going to make sense. What? He asked finally, his voice cracking. What do you mean, Dad? She's my sister. I didn't know about her. I didn't know about you, either, until recently. I should have been there for both of you. Lucas stood up and paced a few steps, his hands running through his hair. So you're saying, I've been dating my sister? For real? This whole time? I nodded, my heart sinking further. Yeah, Lucas. It's a mess. A complete mess. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The shock, the hurt, the confusion. It was all there in his face. We'll figure it out, I said quietly, though I had no idea how. We'll all figure it out. The truth was, I didn't know where to go from here. But there was no going back. My family had been shattered by secrets, and now, all I could do was try to find a way to pick up the pieces and rebuild. The silence in the room was deafening. I stared at Lucas, who stood frozen in place, his face pale. His eyes were wide, full of confusion and disbelief. I couldn't blame him. What had just come out of my mouth? It wasn't something anyone could process in a second. Hell, I couldn't even process it myself. She's your sister, Lucas, I repeated, the words feeling like they were choking me. I should have told you earlier, but I didn't know. I didn't know any of this was going to happen. Lucas took a few shaky steps back, his hands gripping the back of the couch like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. I could see his jaw clenching, his mind trying to work through the impossible. This is insane, Dad, he muttered, his voice a mix of anger and hurt. How could you not have told me? How could you let me? I didn't know. I snapped, my voice cracking. I didn't know she was mine until recently. Emily didn't tell me. God, Lucas, I had no idea. And now, here we are, trying to make sense of a mess that I should have figured out a long time ago. I knew I was losing him, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop talking, couldn't stop the flood of words coming out. The guilt, the shame, it all poured out in a way I hadn't planned. But there it was, my son, standing in front of me, a mix of confusion and betrayal. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, trying to pull it together. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want this to happen." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "I just don't get it. How the hell did this happen, Dad? How did we end up in this situation? I'm dating her. My half-sister. And you never said anything?" I couldn't respond. What could I say to that? How could I explain the years of lies, the silence, the choices I never made? There was nothing that could undo what had been done. I couldn't fix the past. All I could do now was try to salvage the future. I stepped forward, my voice soft but firm. "Lucas, I know this is a lot to take in. Hell, it's a lot for me, too. But we have to figure this out. Together. I know it's messy. I know it's confusing, but I'm here for you. I'm here for both of you." He didn't look at me when he spoke next. He just stared down at the floor, his voice low. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Dad. You lied to me. About everything. I'm just supposed to accept this now? This bombshell you dropped on me? I don't know how to fix this." The words hit harder than anything Clara or Emily could have thrown at me. I didn't know how to fix this either. I was a father who hadn't been there. A man who hadn't protected his family when he should have. I reached out, touching Lucas' shoulder gently. "You don't have to fix anything, son. You don't have to fix me or Sophia or anything. Just try to trust that we'll figure it out. We'll deal with it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to leave you like I did before." He didn't move at first, but eventually, he sighed and shrugged off my hand. "I need time, Dad. I'm not ready to talk about this yet. I don't even know how I'm supposed to feel." I nodded. I understood that. Hell, I was still trying to figure out how I felt. Everything felt broken, shattered, and I wasn't sure how to start putting the pieces back together. That evening, after Lucas went to his room, I sat alone in the living room, staring out the window at the darkening sky. I could hear Sophia's voice from the kitchen. She and my mom were talking, probably trying to get to know each other, and I couldn't bring myself to go in. It wasn't that I didn't want to be there for her. I just didn't know how. How do you make up for 18 years? How do you make someone love you when they've been raised without you? Emily had called again, but I hadn't picked up. She knew what was going on, but I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to talk to her the way I needed to. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies. The fact that she had kept Sophia from me for so long. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her for that. I wanted to. I knew Sophia deserved a chance to know her mother, but right now, all I could feel was anger. Anger that she never gave me the opportunity to be the father I should have been. The worst part? I couldn't even look at Clara without feeling the weight of everything she'd done. She had betrayed me, and yet, I was the one who had let everything slip through my fingers. I'd stayed too long, passive, hoping she'd come back to me, hoping the pieces would fall into place on their own. But they hadn't. And now, we were here, on the other side of it all, dealing with the wreckage of a life I had let go too far. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to shake off the thoughts. I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Nothing about this was going to be easy. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. A way to rebuild. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I could start with what I had left. And that had to count for something. The doorbell rang, and I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. It was Emily. I took a breath, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. She looked at me with a kind of vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I knew I didn't have a choice. But this time, I was ready. Ready to face the mess we'd made. Ready to finally figure out how to move forward. The door creaked as I opened it, and there she stood, Emily. The woman who had been a part of my past, who had shared a brief, passionate chapter of my life. The woman who had, without my knowledge, also given me a daughter. The weight of the situation felt too heavy to bear. After all these years, here we were, facing each other once again. But this time with everything out in the open. "David," Emily said quietly, her voice soft, almost tentative. Her eyes were swollen, red from crying. and I could see the same guilt in them that had been there when she first told me about Sophia. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her in, but I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. It was clear that neither of us were ready for small talk. This wasn't a simple, catching-up conversation. It was a reckoning. "I know you're angry," she began, taking a step into the living room, her hands wringing together nervously. I don't know how to explain everything, how to fix all the mess I've made." I crossed my arms, trying to contain the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, disappointment, pain, but more than that, something I hadn't expected, relief. Relief that she was finally here, that we were finally talking face to face, with no more lies, no more avoiding the truth. "Fix it?" I echoed. "I don't know if you can fix anything. What you did, what we did to our kids, to our families, it's already done. The damage is done." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt anyone, least of all you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't cold. She wasn't detached, like Clara. Emily's remorse was real, raw. She had been carrying this secret for so long, and now it had come crashing down on us both. On Sophia, on Lucas, and it felt like the weight of that burden was finally, painfully, shifting between us. "I don't even know where to start," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I found out I was pregnant with Sophia, I was scared. I was still in college. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if you would want to be a part of her life. I made the choice to keep it from you, and I regret it every day." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her how badly she'd hurt me. But another part of me understood her fear, her uncertainty. I had my own regrets, too. I stayed with Clara for so long, hoping things would change, hoping I could somehow hold the family together. I hadn't been honest with myself, either. "I'm not blaming you for everything," I said quietly, "but you kept something from me that should have been mine to know. My daughter, Emily. My daughter." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but it was different now. It wasn't blind rage. It wasn't about Clara's betrayal anymore. This was something else. The pain of missed time, missed chances with Sophia. I wasn't angry at Emily anymore. Not the way I had been. I was hurt, deeply hurt, but more than anything, I was scared. Scared of how to build something from the wreckage. Emily took a step toward me, her face pleading. "David, I didn't know how to make it right. I didn't know how to tell you and break everything apart. But I thought, when Lucas and Sophia met, I thought maybe now was the time. Maybe we could finally face this together, as messy as it is." I didn't know how to respond. The words felt stuck in my throat. I wanted to yell at her. I wanted to ask her why she kept this from me. I wanted to say all the things I'd held in for so long. But instead, I just stared at her. There was no easy fix. There was no magic moment where everything was forgiven, where everything fell back into place. "I don't know what the hell I'm doing anymore, Emily," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I'm trying to hold everything together, for Lucas, for Sophia, but I don't even know how to fix the mess I made with them. I don't know how to fix what we've lost." "David," she began, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No," I said, cutting her off. "You don't understand. I've been walking around pretending everything was fine, pretending our family was normal, but none of it was. And now I have a son who feels like his world has been turned upside down, and a daughter who's been living with the idea that her father wasn't there for her. I can't just make it right. I can't just fix it." There was silence between us for a moment. I could hear the faint sound of Sophia's voice in the kitchen, talking to my mom, and for a second, it was like the world outside our little conversation was going on as usual. But for me, nothing was the same. I wasn't the same. But then Emily did something I wasn't expecting. She stepped closer and put a hand on my arm. A small, tentative touch. "We can't fix the past, David," she said, her voice soft. "But we can try to do better. For Sophia, for Lucas, for all of us." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, thinking about what she said, about the possibility of trying to move forward. Slowly, cautiously. Could I even begin to rebuild what was broken? Could we ever find a way to live with the weight of everything that had been revealed? I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily, I said, the words feeling heavy in my chest. I don't know if I can forgive myself, but then I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. I didn't have to forgive everything all at once. I didn't have to fix everything in one conversation. I could start small. I could start with what I had left, what we all had left. I'm willing to try, I said, my voice steadier now. For them. For Sophia. Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. That's all I can ask for.